Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna. Good morning
Hare
to all.
Krishna.
We sincerely pray everyone is happy and healthy in Krishna consciousness. And this morning we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 14, entitled The Story of King Vena, and we are on text 32. Nayam arhatya sadvrito.
Nayam arhati asadvrito.
Naradeva varasanam.
Naradeva parasanam.
Yodi agya patim vishnum.
Yodiyagya patim vishnum.
Vinindatya napatrapaha.
Vinindati anapatrapaha.
Nayam arhatya sadvrito.
Nayam arhati asadvrito.
Naradeva varasanam.
Naradeva parasanam.
Yodi agya patim vishnum.
Yodiyagya patim vishnum.
Vinindatya napatrapaha.
Vinindati anapatrapaha.
Nayam arhatya sadvrito.
Nayam arhati asadvrito.
Naradeva varasanam.
Naradeva varasanam.
Yodhi agya patim vishnum.
Yodiyagya patim vishnum.
Vinindatya napatrapaha.
Vinindati anapatrapaha.
Synonyms: na,
Na,
never.
never.
I am
I am
this man.
this man.
Arhati,
Arhati
deserves.
deserves.
Asatvritaha,
Asadvritaha,
full of impious activities.
full of impious activities.
Naradeva,
Naradeva,
of the worldly king or worldly god.
of the worldly king or worldly god.
Vada asanam,
Varaasanam,
the exalted throne.
the exalted throne.
Ya,
Ya,
he who.
he who.
Adhyagyapatim,
Adyagyapatim,
the master of all sacrifices.
the master of all sacrifices.
Vishnu,
Vishnu,
Lord Vishnu.
Lord Vishnu.
Vinindati,
Vinindati,
insults.
insults.
Anapatrapa,
Anapatrapa,
shameless.
shameless.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
Translation: the saintly sages continued, this impious, impudent man does not deserve to sit on the throne at all. He is so shameless that he even dared insult the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu. Purport. One should not at any time tolerate blasphemy and insults against Lord Vishnu or his devotees. A devotee is generally very humble and meek, and he is reluctant to pick a quarrel with anyone, nor does he envy anyone. However, a pure devotee immediately becomes fiery with anger when he sees that Lord Vishnu or his devotee is insulted. This is the duty of a devotee. Although a devotee maintains an attitude of meekness and gentleness, it is a great fault on his part if he remains silent when the Lord or his devotee is blasphemed. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubheva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I first beg the blessings of the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis that I may be able to speak properly. And our Gaudiya Vaishnav Siddhanta, philosophical conclusions, is given to us by our previous acharyas, teachers. And today I sincerely pray to be a servant in unpacking this short but very powerful purport. There is quite a lot to go through, and so my mission today is to go over what is blasphemy and insults, especially of the devotees, but it also applies to Krishna, and explore the difference between, you could say, blasphemy of living entities and blasphemy of Vaishnavas, go into how we can utilize our fiery anger in the service of Krishna, which is very interesting because we get this amazing kind of juxtaposition here of humble and meek and then fiery anger, and how it's the duty of a devotee to kind of manifest this fiery anger to serve the Lord. And then we're going to go through examples of blasphemy in Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Maybe we could have some participatory exchanges in regards to pastimes. And then hopefully we'll have enough time to talk about Narahari Sarkar, who it is his disappearance today, great associate of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So I do have, for the first part of this, I kind of quickly made a keynote here. I go to share screen. And can everybody see the can everybody see my screen?
Yes,
Yeah.
Guru.
Okay. So to begin, what is blasphemy? I mean, this is a very important question for all of us, because when we think about what is blasphemy, right? So in regards to living entities or the jivas, we should respect all living entities, right? Why should we respect all living entities? Because all living entities are part and parcel of Krishna. Everyone is Jivaras Rupoi Krishna Nityadas. Their eternal constitutional position is that of an eternal servant of Krishna. Some living entities have realized that, and others have not yet realized that. And so we have to act accordingly in this world. So Krishna resides next to everyone in the heart. And so we should respect everyone. One incurs sin, papam, if one does not respect a jiva. This is something that we're going to talk about. So here, when we talk about the jivas and blaspheming living entities by not properly respecting them, which means, greeting or being cordial, having, kind of like a disposition in the mind that, oh, we should just be nice to each other. In terms of blasphemy, it's that disrespect, that envy, trying to push others down, dog eat dog, that we can get into that mentality. So we start to disrespect. And when we disrespect the ordinary jivas, it's considered to be sinful. And we're going to talk about how for a Vaishnav, it's actually aparadha. So here it's sinful. And one could say in their mind that, well, sin is destroyed by devotional service, such as chanting, right? We hear these amazing verses about when we chant Hare Krishna, when we chant one name of, Hari, it destroys more sins than we can even commit in this lifetime. And so one might say, well, it's sinful, but I can be disrespectful towards others because then I'll just go chant Hare Krishna and I'll clear up those sins. But Nam no balad yasya hi papa bud here should be yasya, sorry. That this is the seventh offense to the chanting of the holy names, thinking that, oh, I can commit sin and then I'll just wash that all away by chanting the holy names or doing devotional service. Does not work like that. Actually, that will incur aparadha, that'll keep you from progressing in spiritual life. And as Bhagavad Gita 7:28 states, that Yesha Tvanta Papa Gatam Papam, that those who are free of papa, sin, right? Those who are free from papa, they're performing karma punyanam, they're performing pious activities, then te dvandva moha nirmukta, they're free from delusion and doubt in this world. So if we incur sin over sin over sin by disrespecting other people, then it's going to make our devotional service very troublesome. We're going to be full of doubt. We're going to be full of confusion. Te dvandva. Dvandva in moha means delusion and duality. So we're going to be full of duality and doubt when we disrespect others. So we should respect every jivas, and there are different gradations of living entities. For instance, Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes this point, and we don't have to go so much into it now, unless, and maybe we could go to some other time, but different living entities in terms of, you have ordinary jivas, but then you have those who are religious minded or spiritual. Then you have Brahmin jivas, and then even Vaishnava jivas. And I put at the end here how Mrigali the hunter, right? How a spiritual person, right? Mrigali the hunter, his name literally means Mriga. All right, he's the enemy of animals. And so what was he doing? He was half killing animals. With his bow and arrow, he was taught by his father to hunt animals and half kill them, not even fully kill them. he wanted to see them in pain, and he felt such pleasure from that. And he ends up meeting Narada Muni. Narada Muni, what does he do? He's so compassionate upon Murgari the hunter that he, with mystical vision, shows him how all these animals are going to come and basically get revenge on Murgari the hunter. And so this breaks his, consciousness of what he's doing. And then by performing devotional service, he becomes so pure in vision, where before he used to love half killing animals and seeing them be tortured. Now his guru Narada Muni is coming with Angira Rishi, and he goes to pay his obeisances, but there's ants on the pathway. And so what does he do? He takes his chadar and he gently moves the ants. So Murgari the hunter becomes a devotee. He respects even ants. So this is something that, sometimes can be a great stumbling block for those who are on the spiritual path, as they think that they're holier than others, holier than thou, that I'm a devotee, everybody should give me respect, so I don't have to show any respect to others. But the true vision of a spiritualist is that they see everyone connected to Krishna. And so again, if one disrespects living entities, then they incur sin, makes life very difficult. So what is blasphemy for Aparadha and Vaishnavas? So Aparadha, what does it mean to blaspheme a devotee? Here we have a verse from Skanda Purana. I won't go through the Sanskrit, but that foolish person who criticized an exalted Vaishnava falls down to the hell known as Maharorava, along with his forefathers. So whoever kills a Vaishnava, blasphemes, speaks harshly to a Vaishnava. 1 second. So whoever kills a Vaishnava, speaks harshly to a Vaishnava, feels malice towards him, wants to, is so angry, feeling hatred towards a Vaishnava or devotee Vaishnavi. 4, does not properly greet a Vaishnava. And this goes back to disrespect, right? Respectful is just, even sometimes just smiling at somebody is a nice greet. It doesn't even have to be words. Becoming angry at the devotees. And 6, does not feel joy upon seeing the devotees. And so these are the 6 types of misconduct or blasphemy towards devotees. And I wanted to put this up so everybody could see this, save this later, that to really meditate on how we behave with devotees. And even there's 3 faults in devotees that we can then also create disrespect or blasphemy against, is that we could criticize the past of a devotee, right? And to see a devotee and know their past, one might feel like, oh, I knew that person. They were doing so many different types of activities in the past. How could they be chanting and happy now? And you're criticizing the past of that person. And then 2, another blasphemy or criticism is criticism of a certain activity when being purified. So in our devotional lives, we're trying to purify ourselves, and sometimes we're not always our best selves. Sometimes we might perform activities or say certain things or do certain things that are not up to the code of Vaishnavism. And somebody might see that as, oh, somebody's not perfectly clean they're in the shower still, they're not perfectly clean. And so we're going to criticize them even though they're not completely pure yet. They're still purifying themselves. And then the last one, faulty behavior, even though perfect. And this is a very interesting point, that one might be on the higher levels of devotional service, and for whatever reason, right, we can think of Jai and Vijay, who are pure devotees of the Lord. They're the guardians of Vaikuntha, and yet they seemingly did an activity against the four Kumars that was, it could be criticism, or it was faulty behavior of them. But it was all a plan of the Lord. So even though they're in the highest platforms of love of God, prema, they seemingly perform a faulty behavior. And so we could look at that and be critical or blaspheme persons who are on the pure platform. But for whatever reason, Krishna has a plan that they might have a little bit of faulty behavior. And so previously we spoke about how it's sinful for disrespecting any living entity, but now it's aparad when it comes to the Vaishnavas, the devotees. So what does aparadha mean? Aparadha means, in one sense, some devotees translate it as that which goes against Srimati Radharani, who is Swarup Shakti, who is the pleasure potency of the Lord, who manifests bhakti within our heart. So aparadha means that it's going to be a great stumbling block in our devotional life. So sin can kind of be, immediately dealt with for devotional service, but when one performs aparad, then one is not able to experience devotional service. One is not able to experience the holy name as Krishna himself. One will keep themselves from attaining love of God. So if we go to Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, chapter 74, text 40, stated here that anyone who fails to immediately leave the place where he hears criticism of the Supreme Lord as faithful devotees will certainly fall down bereft of his pious credit. So what happens with aparad, and this is a very powerful point that Srila Rupa Goswami even makes in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that if one makes an offense or even hears offense, right? Even if they stay in the place and hear criticism of the Lord or devotees, that's considered blasphemy, that's considered aparad. Pious credits will be taken away. And Srila Rupa Goswami says you can even fall from your different rasas. So if you're in Madhurya ras, then you could then get kicked down a rasa. And then if the blasphemy is severe, then you'll lose your devotional service. You'll actually give up bhakti. And so Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 19, text 156 says, Hatimata, blaspheming devotees. If we're criticizing in the three faults of the past, the present, and the faulty behavior, if we're performing these six sadhu ninda, the kill a Vaishnav, speak harshly against a Vaishnav, if we're performing these things, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says it's hatimata, which is a mad elephant that will rip up the creeper of devotional service. So one could lose all taste of devotional service. One could completely give up devotional service if they perform blasphemy towards a devotee or towards Krishna. And so then Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, text 30 and 31, Api Chet Sudaracharo Bhajate Mam Ananyabhak. That so for a person on the path of devotional service, Right? Should see that the devotees are, even if they're not completely purified, they're trying. Right? They're trying to do their best, and so then they should be considered saintly, even if one sees something that might be, as Krishna states, abominable. Even if one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. And in text 31, he quickly becomes righteous and attains the lasting peace, O son of Kunti. Declare boldly that my devotee never perishes. So how powerful it is to commit any type of blasphemy. And Bhagavad Gita, Krishna stating that we should see the good in others, how they're trying. And if they're trying, if they're sincere, and if anybody's sincere, then they're going to be quickly delivered by Krishna. So critique and faults for benefit. So here's an interesting point then, is that we shouldn't hear any blasphemy. And that's what the purport is saying, stating today, one should not at any time tolerate blasphemy and insults against Lord Vishnu or his devotees. So critique and faults for benefit. So we heard about, well, we shouldn't hear blasphemy, we shouldn't criticize, we shouldn't perform the 6 types of sadhu ninda, but what about hearing for benefit for different reasons? So this is an interesting thing. Critique. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat actually states that it's sadachar for devotees to critique the dangers of their ways, helping others. So it's all going to go back to what is our motive. If we're critiquing others and we're critiquing society, right? We critique society about cow slaughter. We critique society about different sinful activities that can drag down the world. And so that's what the Brahmins here, they critiqued King Vena, and they saw that King Vena was not helping the world. And so they're reflecting on his sins, and so they need to do something. So this is actually sadachar, which means eternal conduct. Sat means eternal, achar means proper conduct or behavior. And so to critique others for helping them, right? So it all goes, as if being a parent, sometimes you have to critique your child, and you have to do it in such a way that you're going to encourage rather than discourage. And it's always going to be a battle, but you're doing it out of love. So we could even reflect on the faults of Vaishnavas for helping others, right? If we reflect on certain faults of Vaishnavas and we're in a specific friendship with them, or we're also in a particular, you could say, management department head, you see that somebody has some things that they're struggling with, and you can reflect on their faults to then help them. You're not going to necessarily gossip, spread it around or anything like that, but internally, you're just, okay, I recognize somebody's dealing with this and I'm going to try and help them. And then it could benefit the world by reflecting on certain types of faults, benefiting the world in a way where you think of Valmiki Magrai Jagai Marai, so one's own spiritual advancement, benefiting the world, right? When we read Ramayana and we hear about Valmiki Muni, he was a hunter. He was very degraded in consciousness, but then Narada Muni got him to chant the name Mata, 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 Ram, Ram. He became a pure devotee. So we could look at the past of Valmiki, and we're reading and we're meditating on his faults, but it's actually for our benefit to realize how we can transform. Mrgari the hunter, we brought him up, how we read in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he becomes a pure devotee, but then we're reflecting on his past faults. Is this bona fide? Should we not read this part of Chaitanya Charitamrita? No, it's actually there to give us example to then transform. Go ahead. And then, of course, Jagai and Madai, which is a pastime that we can bring up a little later also. But for those who might not know, Jagai and Madai, very, very, you could just say, just the worst people, some of the worst people in history. And yet they go through a complete transformation. And so when we're reading Chaitanya Bhagavat and Chaitanya Charitamrita, again, we're reflecting on their faults after they've become devotees, but it's for our benefit, for the world's benefit, for our own spiritual advancement. Now, how does blasphemy come about within the heart? Bad association. So Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 22, text 87, Asat Sangha Tyaga E Vaishnava Achar, Stri Sangi Ekas Asadu Krishna Bhakta Ar. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would point out that this is one of the first qualifications, is that Asat Sangha Tyaga, a Vaishnav should always avoid the association of ordinary people or non-devotees. So what does this mean? Vaishnavas should also avoid the company of those who are not devotees of Lord Krishna. Now, this can be taken in a very fanatical way, right? That I'm going to close myself up. I'm not going to, be in the world and greet and meet people. Again, this goes back to disrespecting the jivas, but what this means is taking on their mentality, right? Asat Sangha Tyaga. When you associate with others, then you take on their qualities. So there's a difference between giving association, taking association. Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur in Sri Chaitanya Shikshamrita, when one is a householder, you have a career, you have a job, you have so many people you have to meet and interact with. Are you going to not interact with those people because they're not devotees? No, you're going to associate with them in a very cordial way, greeting them, being nice, being a nice person. Going back to being a nice person is so powerful in this world, especially now. But you're not going to intimately take on their mentality. And so this goes back to also critiquing and seeing that calling a spade is not a fault, but you understand that, well, this person has this consciousness, this mentality. I don't want this really infecting my mentality, my consciousness. So, and we have the example of Dvivida the gorilla in Srimad Bhagavatam, who Balaram battles. There's this huge battle between Dvivida, this powerful gorilla who's throwing huge trees and boulders at Balaram, and Balaram's just taking up his club and smashing them, and there's this huge fight. Dvivida, the gorilla, was actually in the army of Lord Ramachandra. And what happened? He started to associate with persons who did not have his best interest, who were actually against devotional service, and he started criticizing Lakshman or Balaram. He actually started criticizing the Supreme Lord within his heart. And because of associating with Narakasura, who was a great demoniac person, he took on that mentality and started polluting sacrificial places, just even started being very rude to the gopis and to Balaram themselves. So you see this bad association come up a lot in Srimad Bhagavatam, and others even associating with Jarasandha, becoming demoniac, even though they were once pure. So to keep in mind, bad association, asat sangha tyaga, what does it really mean? It doesn't mean we're going to close ourselves off, but that mentality seeping into, and us not putting up guard against that. So how to deal with blasphemy, and thinking about how to deal with blasphemy, or even how to deal with certain things in this world as we're going through our spiritual journey. I put this up, Bhagavatam versus Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so we'll go through examples of Srimad Bhagavatam, but then we'll also go through examples of Chaitanya Charitamrita. So there's certain things that might be stated or performed in the times of Bhagavatam, which was thousands of years ago, sometimes millions of years ago, which are not applicable to Kali Yuga. And so we have the examples of Bhagavatam, but then for us in this Kali Yuga, we have the examples of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the 6 Goswamis, and those who are practicing devotional service in Kali Yuga. So pause. And so going through different examples, maybe someone wants to bring out some examples of Bhagavatam, of blasphemy, and how it was either dealt with or not dealt with, or maybe somebody wants to bring up some examples of Bhagavatam of devotee being blasphemed.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I was just thinking of Shishupal. Yeah, and how he was blaspheming Krishna, and then eventually he got the chakra and liberation. Thank you.
Yeah, the verse that I quoted about anyone who fails to immediately leave the place where he hears criticism of the Supreme Lord, or his faithful devotee will certainly fall down bereft of his pious credit. That's from the chapter of Shishupal. And Shishupal was the cousin of Krishna, and he was such a blasphemer of the Lord that his aunt came to Krishna and said, "Please forgive my son for blaspheming you." And Krishna said, "I'll forgive him for 100 offenses or blasphemies." And ultimately, at the end, Shishupal, who is an incarnation of Jai and Vijay, Shishupal was cut. His head was cut off at the sacrificial arena where Yudhishthira Maharaj was performing sacrifice. And the Lord did not eventually did not tolerate that blasphemy. Any other pastimes?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Vijay Krishna Prabhu.
My obeisances, Bhagopal Das Prabhu. Prabhu, you, during your class, you brought in relation to blasphemy, to kill someone. And you are asking us examples from Srimad Bhagavatam related to devotees being blasphemed. It came to my mind in relation to killing or trying to kill, a very popular example from the Srimad Bhagavatam, at least in Vaishnava circles. Hiranyakashipu was blaspheming his own son, Prahlad Maharaj, in such a way that he tried to kill him in so many ways.
Yeah. Do you remember the different ways?
Oh, not all, but I can give you some. He was there asking his servants to throw his son from a precipice. He ordered his servants for his son to be put inside a closed place, like a jail, full of snakes. and also boil him in burning oil.
Yeah, like crazy to think how Hiranyakashipu was trying to kill his 5-year-old son, but Govinda Paritamrita, Prahlad Maharaj, he was completely protected by the Lord, and at the end, Nrsingadev comes out to deal with Hiranyakashipu's blasphemy. Yeah, thank you, Prabhu, for.
You're welcome, Prabhu.
And is that Vrinda?
It's me, Bala.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was thinking in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Maybe I was in and out of the Pajari room, but there's the example in Chaitanya Charitamrita with Ramachandra Puri.
Well, we'll get to Chaitanya Charitamrita in a little bit, but because we're doing like a Bhagavatam versus Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Oh, so you're going through Bhagavatam.
Bhagavatam first, and then we'll get to Chaitanya Lila. Forgive my offense.
Oh, yeah, I missed that part. Okay. Sorry.
Vrinda, you wanted to?
Yeah. I was thinking of the previous previous canto. Actually, when we were learning about how Lord Shiva was being offended by Daksha.
This canto. Fourth canto.
In the previous chapters.
Yeah.
I mean, the mayhem that ensued from that was just terrible.
And I actually wanted to read a verse quickly dealing with that pastime. That so in the previous chapters, we hear about Daksha being so proud that he wouldn't let Lord Shiva, to partake in the sacrifice, and he was very disrespectful to Lord Shiva, even speaking harshly. And so Sati went to a sacrifice that her father was performing. So Sati is the daughter of Daksha and wife of Lord Shiva. And so she went to the sacrifice to represent and also to partake in the celebration. And Daksha was still very disrespectful towards her and Lord Shiva. And so Sati stated that if one hears an irresponsible person blaspheme the master and controller of religion, one should block his ears and go away if unable to punish him. But if one is able to kill, then one should by force cut out the blasphemer's tongue and kill the offender. And that after that, one should give up his own life. So we can hear this instruction of Sati, and we actually saw how she then self-immolates. She uses her yogic powers to burst into flames, and then ultimately she's reborn as Parvati, the eternal consort of Lord Shiva. But one could read this statement and be, wow, I just heard somebody blaspheming Vrinda Sundari. I better go cut their tongue out. I better go kill that person because they're blaspheming. Well, we have to back up and realize, again, this is Bhagavatam. And so what might be applicable in the time of Bhagavatam is not applicable in the time of Kali Yuga. And so even how our acharyas take this verse apart, saying, well, a kshatriya, one who's a warrior, they should be the one who cuts out the tongue. A Brahmin should leave that place. A Vaishya and Sudra, they should take their own lives. So this is very, very drastic example and instructions that is not applicable to Kali Yuga. So we should, again, that's why I'm making this point of Bhagavatam versus Chaitanya Charitamrita. Sati is what she's doing, is she's saying blasphemy of the devotees and the Lord is so severe that it's going to completely obstruct your devotional service in your life. So it's a very, very powerful statement. But again, we have to take it in accordance with how Lord Chaitanya also teaches us. So in the chat, Anasuya referenced Shringi. Yeah, is she there on the call?
Yeah, she's here.
Sorry, Hare Krishna Prabhu. Yeah, I was thinking it was really interesting what you're going through. So it's interesting that actually, in a sense, Parikshit Maharaj, it was considered, right, that he, in some form, right, was also responsible for blaspheming, and Samika Rishi, and then Shringi to blaspheme, obviously offend Parikshit Maharaj. And I thought it was interesting because in that episode, we also hear that the whole thing was almost necessary for Bhagavatam to be spoken. So I thought it was an interesting, episode from Bhagavatam in this regard.
Oh, yeah, nice. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, very powerful.
I have one, Prabhu.
Yes, Krishna Sharan.
Yeah, Jordan blaspheming Vidura, who is none other than Yamaraj himself, and chased out of the palace.
Yeah, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, what I found really interesting is that Vidura, he took that as an opportunity. He did not retaliate or anything. He took that as an opportunity to increase his Krishna consciousness by going on pilgrimage, hearing from saintly persons. He did not retaliate.
Yeah, it's a very parallel story to what Anasuya Mataji just brought up. So yeah, very nice references, and also going to how those personalities, Parikshit Maharaj, they're very much perfect persons, and yet there might be some seemingly faulty activity, but then we see how it's actually the Lord's arrangement for giving us examples and then also bringing about Srimad Bhagavatam. And it is getting a little late, but I did want to bring up Bhrigu Muni, which is very powerful and which will bring us into Chaitanya Charitamrita, because we have, we could go through Jad Bharat, Ambarish Maharaj with Durvasa. There's so many examples. Chitraketu with Lord Shiva, so many examples. Bhagavatam is just telling us over and over and over again, don't blaspheme devotees. Don't even blaspheme living entities. We see how there's sin and so many things happen. Draupadi being disrobed, Kurukshetra war takes place. So there's so many different examples that are so powerful. And I just wanted to highlight Bhrigu Muni to take us to Chaitanya Charitamrita, because it's going to bring up this point of meekness and humility and connect it with today's purport, that we have Bhrigu Muni, who's on the bank of the river. I think it's Sarayu, and different personalities are saying, of the three Trimurti, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, who's the greatest? And Bhrigu Muni goes to test. He's the son of Brahma, so he goes to test the Trimurti. First, he goes to Lord Brahma, and he's disrespectful in a very subtle, slight way. He doesn't properly show respect to his father, like we talked about showing respect to jivas. And so what happens is Brahma becomes a little angry, but because there's a deeper intelligence, he's able to withhold his anger, and he doesn't retaliate against Bhrigu Muni. Bhrigu Muni then goes to Lord Shiva, and he starts verbally blaspheming. And directly to Lord Shiva, Shiva becomes so angry that he's about to attack his own brother Bhrigu Muni. But then he goes to Lord Vishnu. And what happens? He physically kicks the chest of Vishnu. And what is Vishnu's reaction? Vishnu's reaction is your foot okay? Did my chest hurt your foot? And there's no offense to himself. Lord Vishnu does not take any offense to himself, but Lakshmi Devi, she sees this, and she's a little bit critical of Bhrigu Muni. So that takes us into Chaitanya Charitamrita, where now let's dive into pastimes where there's blasphemy, but it's interesting how to correlate that with Bhrigu Muni and how the devotees, they don't take any offense themselves if they're offended. Now, and this brings to that it's a duty of a devotee to use fiery anger when one sees that Lord Vishnu and his devotee is insulted. So Tushta Krishna Prabhu, you were going to bring up Ramachandra Puri or Ramachandra Khan? If you're still there.
The disciple of Ishvara Puri, he's back up on the altar, but he's saying the disciple of Ishvara Puri.
Yes, so Ramachandra Puri, Ishvara Puri was his godbrother. They were both disciples of Madhavendra Puri. And so we see how Ramachandra Puri, he starts criticizing his spiritual master. And, Madhavendra Puri, Ayidina Dayardranatahe Maturanata Kadavalokyase. He's calling out to, oh, master of Mathura, Dayata Brahmiti Kim Karumyaham, that he's calling out to the Lord, lamenting, but he's thinking my spiritual master should be Brahman realized. He's lamenting, he should be beyond lamenting. And so because of criticizing his spiritual master, Madhavendra Puri says, get out, I don't even want to see your face. What does he do? He starts to criticize others. And he criticizes Lord Chaitanya. He can't even actually find a fault to criticize Lord Chaitanya. So he actually has to conjecture and make up that, oh, I see some ants near your residence, so you're eating sweetmeats, you're overeating. And he starts criticizing Lord Chaitanya for overeating. But what does Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu do? He actually takes the critique seriously and reduces his food eating. And the other devotees are so upset, but Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he sees Ramachandra Puri as his senior, as basically expansion of his own guru, because Ishvara Puri, this is God brother, so he's taking this critique to heart and he's changing his activities, even though all the other devotees don't like it. So it's interesting how, again, going back to how Lord Vishnu and the devotees, if somebody blasphemes them, then they don't feel any, they feel they're immediately giving forgiveness, and they're not taking it, how would you say, they're not reacting to it. As Anasuya brought up, Parikshit Maharaj also, he's not reacting to that. And
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu.
Nityananda Prabhu, he didn't take offense from the offenses practiced against him by the two sinful brothers, Jagai and Madai.
Yes, thank you so much, Prabhu. This is like our main example that we have, Jagai and Madai, right? They're so horrible persons, and Lord Nityananda, Haridas Thakur go to save them. Lord Nityananda tries to preach to them, and Jagai takes up Madai takes up a clay pot, smashes it over the head of Lord Nityananda. There's blood coming down from the head, and he's going to smash him again, and Jagai stops Madai. Now, what does Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu do? Right? He comes with his chakra, right?
Yes.
So he comes with his chakra and he's going to kill Jagai and Madai. But Lord Nityananda says, Jagai saved me. Please be merciful to Jagai. And Madai, seeing how Jagai is saved, he also wants to be saved. So Lord Chaitanya says, you have to ask forgiveness of Lord Nityananda. So here's a great pastime. So I read how Sati, in Bhagavatam, and even like Jad Bharat, right? Kalima comes out and kills these people who are going to sacrifice Jad Bharat. There's seemingly like a violent overtone that's there in Bhagavatam, that, just ready to take action. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he shows by example that instead of killing Jagai and Madai, turning them into devotees. And so when we read like a purport today where we're supposed to we're supposed to be filled with fiery anger, right? Devotees are meek and humble. So what is Trinadapi Sunichena Tororiva Sahishnuna? Tolerant than a tree, lower than the straw on the street. So that's for ourselves. If we see another person who's blaspheming the devotees and the Lord, it goes back to what is our motive. We want to try to stop them from blaspheming because we've just read how it incurs sin, it incurs aparadha. Our motive is to help them stop blaspheming because it's going to keep them from engaging in devotional service. It's going to keep them from being spiritually minded. And so what does fiery anger mean here, right? We even see with Devananda Pandit. Devananda Pandit, he criticized Srivas Thakur. Srivas Thakur was hearing Bhagavatam. Srivas Thakur fell. Chaitanya Chandrodaya Natika says he fell off of a balcony and it seemed like he died, and he fell into the courtyard where Devananda Pandit was speaking Bhagavatam, and disciples, Srivas Thakur, he was unconscious. They just dragged him out of the courtyard, and he was crying and experiencing ecstasy from Bhagavatam. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu becomes filled with fiery anger towards Devananda Pandit. Devananda Pandit, he's reciting Bhagavatam, and Lord Chaitanya is remembering how Devananda Pandit criticized, blasphemed Srivas Thakur. And he says, Devananda Pandit, you have no realization of Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam is like yogurt, which Shukadev Goswami churned into butter and then gave it to Parikshit Maharaj. And you have no realization of this. He even went to rip up the Srimad Bhagavatam. He was so angry, and devotees had to stop Lord Chaitanya. So he was filled with fiery anger. And then what happened? Because of this fiery anger, because of Lord Chaitanya bringing about this criticism of Devananda Pandit for his own good, then later on he takes shelter of Rakeshwar Pandit and prays for forgiveness and becomes a devotee. So it's very, we're supposed to be meek and humble. If somebody is directing criticism towards us, but if somebody's directing criticism towards another devotee or Vishnu, then it's the duty of a devotee to stand up and try and correct the matter. But again, why are we doing it? That's the key issue. Are we actually doing it for the other person's benefit? So I don't want to go too much longer. If there's any kind of further reflections, examples, or anything anybody wants to bring up before we go into a brief glorification of Narahari Sarkar, whose disappearance day is today. So it's also, when we think about blaspheming Vaishnavas on the appearance and disappearance days of the associates of Lord Chaitanya, it's our duty to glorify them, and it's a blasphemy if we don't bring out their glory. So we do want to not blaspheme Narahari Sarkar. So if anybody wants to give any reflections, or if there's questions or comments, we can take those now. Or if there's nothing to add, we can go into the glorification of Narahari Sarkar.
I think it's a great topic I'd like to discuss more offline.
Okay. All right. So for the glories of Narahari Sarkar. So Narahari Sarkar in Vraj Leela in Vrindavan, he is actually a Saki or Gopi named Madhumati, and his eternal service to Shri Radha Govinda is giving Radha Govinda honey. So Madhumati, one who is giving honey. And so when he appears in Gaur Leela, in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, he appears as Narahari Sarkar in the town of Srikhanda. And there is a statement by Srila Jagannath Das Babaji that states Navadvip is the abode of Goloka, Vrindavan is the abode of Gokul, and Srikhanda is the abode of Vaikuntha. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we can see how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very much loved the residents of Srikhanda. And the three main residents are Narahari Sarkar, his brother Mukunda Sarkar, and Mukunda's son Raghunandan Thakur. And Narahari Sarkar, even before Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in this world, he was writing poetry about Radha and Krishna. And Narahari Sarkar was a great musician, poet, and so he would glorify Radha and Krishna, but he was the only one who could actually glorify Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for others, he would close his ears if anybody said, oh, you're Krishna, you're Vishnu. He was playing the role of a devotee, but he would allow Narahari Sarkar to directly glorify him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and as the combined form of Shri Shri Radha Govinda. And there's even one pastime where Lord Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya, they're walking, and Lord Nityananda sees Narahari Sarkar, and he says, he addresses him that, oh, where is the madhu? Where is the honey? And so Narahari Sarkar, by his Vaishnava powers, creates a lake, a small pond of mead or honey that was like nectar. So very powerful personality. And his main disciple was Sri Lochan Das Thakur, who wrote many, many songs glorifying Lord Chaitanya, and wrote Sri Chaitanya Mangala, which is one of the biographies of Lord Chaitanya. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur states that Narahari Sarkar, right, in the Gaur Arati song, which is, the Gaur Arati song is depicting the, you could say the yoga pit or the main meditation of Navadvip. You have Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sitting on the throne, and you have different devotees surrounding him performing different services. So Nara Hari Adi Kari Chamara Dulaya. That Narahari Sarkar, he's fanning with a chamara, yak-tail fan. He's fanning Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with the chamara in the main yoga pit, you could say mantrapasana song that we have about Lord Chaitanya. And I just wanted to read one very amazing song that Narahari Sarkar wrote. It's called Jadi Gauranga Nahito. So we'll close with this powerful meditation. If Shri Gauranga had not appeared, then what would have become of us? How would we have survived? Who could have taught the world about the glories of Srimati Radharani and the topmost limit of Prema Ras? Who would have had true insight to enter the sweet rapture of the forest of Vrindadevi and the power to render loving service in the mood of the damsels of Braj? With a simple heart, always sing about Gauranga's glorious qualities. I cannot see even one person as compassionate as he in this ocean of material existence. Even though I chant Gauranga, my heart has not melted. How do I continue to maintain this body? How has Narahari been created with a stone in place of a heart? So, Srila Narahari Sarkar ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubheva
Patitanam Pavanabhyo, Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha.
Nantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna. Have a beautiful day in Krishna.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna to you too, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.